This is the Good Neighbor Podcast, the place where local businesses and neighbors come together. Here's your host, Jeff Gardner.
Welcome to another episode of the Good Neighbor Podcast. Today we have another good neighbor on, Michael Smele of Mortgage Truth. Michael, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. We've had I've just learned so much about just being a marketer. We learn marketing, but marketing attaches us to almost every business vertical in the local area. So we learn about real estate. I learn about physiotherapy, love my fitness guys because that's my background. But mortgages is something that confused me. I was uncertain about it, didn't know how to do it, always felt scared about it. And what I find myself uncertain and scared of, I just avoid. And often it's just a little piece of knowledge or somebody being like, hey, it's not as hard as you think. Let me share that with you. So to have another mortgage agent on, really important to us. Plus, when we talk to our audience, you know, this is the year of increased interest rates and now coming down. And there's a lot of flux going back and down and renewals and all this kind of stuff. So I'm not going to spoil it. Don't want to share your story for you, but let's start off at the top. What is it you do, man? What is Mortgage Truth?
Yeah, so thanks for that's a great question. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, about Mortgage Truth, it's a little bit different from a point of view where we have our mortgage business. Mortgage Truth really it's the educational arm. It's kind of the consumer facing arm of the business that we exist. It's going to sound, different, but we exist to expose the bank's secrets to the advantage of the consumer. So I know most mortgage companies, they work tirelessly to almost mimic the banks and their behavior, or provide the exact same proposition under a better customer service model. But I like to think that we work more like investigative journalists, to be honest with you. We try to get what's behind the rhetoric, behind the headlines, and provide our clients with the truth about their mortgage and about the bank's motivations, because we know they're not necessarily motivated by the consumer's benefit, right? We do this through our newsletters, blog posts. We try to leverage social media with educational and satirical posts. We like to poke the bear sometimes. We like to make fun of the bank.
So I love that. And I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit here and provide, something from my take is I now consider myself like internally when I'm having those internal conversations with myself, which happen often. There's like a roommate in there constantly causing problems. And we have this internal dialogue. Sometimes it's a he, sometimes it's a she, sometimes it's just an entity, but there's something in there that I am not always aligned with. But I consider myself like I want to be a seeker of truth because it has caused me pain in the upfront short-term moment, but has granted me a great level of reward long-term. And I found that living underneath the truth or around it, just not in it, has sometimes given me a little less upfront pain, but for long-term detriment to my mental health, life, environment, etc. So that's my take on truth. And I love to read and find out these great historical books, philosophers and psychologists, that they will often say the same thing. But it seems like a big portion of us, certainly I was in this world, probably still am to a certain degree, but when I read about people and from my own experience, that truth, it's not so easy to find. And sometimes we will flat out say that the truth hurts us, avoid it. So if you're saying, you've kind of alluded to that already, that a lot of mortgage agents try to adapt the best practices or the business model of the bank with a deeper level of human-to-human relationship, and that's how they kind of out-service the bank. They've chosen to stick to that status quo with a little extra, whereas you have chosen to peel back the curtain. So, kind of a disruptor in that world. Why do that? Why go against the grain if so much of the group has decided not to and probably made good businesses? There's a lot of great mortgage agents out there. And if the vast majority aren't doing that, then why do it?
That's a great question. I am a contrarian by nature, and I've always I've always cheered for the underdog. It's part of it's been my story. I'm sure we'll get to it, but also, yeah, the idea that that these banks can get away with it, and unfortunately, the last 4 years have shown the overreach. Anyways, I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, but when there's collusion between the powers that be, and free Canadians' bank accounts get frozen. Not going to get political here. Just
Yeah.
it's just there's a reality there that almost like something that was in my gut way before. Like, we're talking back in the days of 2005, where you fogged a mirror to get a mortgage. You get 100% of your mortgage and 5% more borrowed. You fog the mirror, you got your qualification. Everyone got a mortgage. Even back then, I was suspicious of the banks. It was something inherent. And my grandfather was a banker, so our family, my father was provided for by the bank's money. So it wasn't like, I wasn't trying to bite the hand that fed it. It's just more, I think, it's my bent. My bent is to, if it's too good to be true, I'm gonna look underneath. If there's someone out there who's monopolized or dominated an industry for a long time, I'm like, well, who's hurting because of that? If not always the case that it's so, but often a monopoly hurts others, and it's like, well, who else is going to be able to get their comeuppance by being able to either throw off or innovate or disrupt. So that's kind of my bent, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, you and I both, we're kind of in the small and medium business world. So often we will be dealing with underdogs, not people with, for us, we don't deal with people who have $2 and $3 million annual marketing budgets. So some people have a 10,000 for the entire year budget. So the education piece is so much more important, as so many doors have been closed to people just by the nature of the ingredients of the situation. If you don't have this, you can't get all of these, period. I'm not going to go into it, type of thing. So I'd like to think, a lot of fighting on their behalf to reveal these truths, to set them up on a better path. It seems like you do the same thing. But so the listener has a better understanding. So far, they probably understand that you're in the mortgage world, that you educate to a big piece of that it's about seeking the truth for their benefit. But do you also offer these types of services, or are you a teacher of it only?
You're saying theory versus practicum. Like, do I apply what I believe?
Oh, no, I imagine you very much do. But if I become a client of yours, am I coming there to be educated, or am I coming there to be educated and to get a refinancing, a mortgage, a renewal, etc.?
Yeah. I mean, the education component is always first, and I think the heart of any good financial service professional is to have an educator's heart first. So we always educate, and it really is good for business. I've learned this over many years.
I agree.
You educate and you provide options, and then often you send them away because there's nothing you can do in that moment, or they have to do two or three things before you can actually help them into a product. But that always comes back with referrals down the road. Might be 2 or 3 years, but then you're getting referred to be on a podcast, right? Something happens when you do that as your primary mode of operation versus just trying to shove them into a product, or come hell or high water, we're going to help you purchase this home. It's like, well, I very often that's the worst thing that can do, and it's been proved out since 2022 to today, where a lot of people were I won't say forced, but the greed was there, and then they the numbers worked, but should they have worked, or should they have taken that mortgage? And a lot of these people are the ones who have sold over the last 2 years for a loss, and they've lost their life savings. They've lost the money that they've saved up for, or their parents saved up for, maybe multi-generational savings that have just gone poof. And it's like that's real. That to me is not something to be overlooked. So yeah, the stance of the educator first is primary, but yeah, we always want to lead them into a product with us, of course. But there are times where it doesn't work, and we can still lead them on to a referral partner that has a niche for that specific product as well.
Yeah, love it. So just to be clear, though, I can come to you, get a mortgage, talk about it, and actually buy the products and services from you guys. Along with that, I will get a deep level of education for my benefit. Yeah,
100%. Yeah, we're all about getting business done.
yeah. No, it's beautiful. Um, I just think it's so valuable. By the time I was in the market for buying a home, I've been very lucky. I only talk about this podcast really is an extension of mine and my partner's life, which I don't know how to make things outside of that. So it's
Any
just
different,
by
right?
its
Yeah.
nature. Right. So I only talk about a handful of things. Most of those things are inked onto my arm, my rules for life. Fitness would be one of them, philosophy, small business, scaling. Mentorship is a big one. So I often talk about the same woman. She doesn't even know she's being promoted so much on this podcast because she
Wow.
refuses to watch them because she's like, I'm 70. I don't do podcasts. Get on Oprah and I'll see you on there, is what she told me. But I said, probably not happening in my lifetime. Anyway, she told me by the time, like, I'm 37 now. So it started the conversations around 30, 31 to get into buying a home. And she says, are you going to use it for investment? Financial benefit. And I said, well, yeah, everybody gets wealthy off real estate, don't they? And she said, no, that's a very blanketed statement and often not true at all. She knows my business very well and she knows the profitability of it. She says, you take that same amount of money that would have gone to your mortgage, and then you compare the returns on that mortgage, which aren't so guaranteed. You base it on history and there's a certain level of certainty there. I get it, but you would reinvest that into your business and also probably the same amount or less level of uncertainty based on the history of the business. And your returns could be 10 to 20 or 30x that of a home in my situation at that time.
Right.
And it has become more true since 31 to 37 over the last handful of years that we've gone through. And it's why I rent. And still to this day, I check in with the experts that are in my realm, mortgage and real estate and her. And between the conversations between the three, it's like, you're still much better off to rent. The flexibility that you want. I don't have a wife and a kid. So the one thing that they did say is if you are looking to dig roots in deeply for the safety and security of your family, and you don't want to have the chance of being evicted or them selling the home or things like that, then okay, that's a conversation, but you don't have that. And you just need a roof over your head, essentially. I'm kind of a minimalistic type of guy, but I love growing the business. So that was a no-brainer decision for me once the education piece was there. But
Right.
I grew up in a family, mother banking, TD Bank, 42 years. Dad was a commission salesperson. They made decent money, but it was the house that they bought for, I don't know, $250,000 37 years ago that now is upwards towards $2 million. That's where they made their big nut for their 4 decades. It seems like that realm has changed a little bit for my millennial generation, at least to a degree. So for me, a much better situation. I would not want to have gone through the mortgage problems and the real estate issues that some of the people in my realm are going through right now. And it was only because of the education you're talking about that I was able to make that decision. So I just wanted to put that piece to my own experience so the audience can hear that as well. I think, when you can just provide your own experience, it kind of reinforces the point that some of these things are very true and can have huge repercussions, positive or negative. But I wanted to get into what brought you to this stage. So much about this podcast is storytelling. So much about marketing and branding is storytelling. I think so much about human connection, which really this is all about, is storytelling. So to find out your story a bit more, what brought you into this world? We heard you were explaining a little bit before that you kind of had a gripe with this lack of quality information and decided to make that change. Bit of a disruptor, which I have a great deal of respect for. Somebody's handing you a paint can and it's called blue, but it's clearly red. You're like, this is wrong. So I love that. But what made you decide to get into the world of mortgages, really?
Yeah. It's I'm trying to figure out where to start, but I'm gonna go way back, and I know you appreciate some storytelling, so I'll give you some history. Um, I grew up in a family of 11 children, so yeah, it's it was
You the
I
first
mean
baby, or you in the middle?
I'm the oldest and the first male, so if you've read anything about birth order, I'm like a firstborn again, so as far as my behavior and conduct, so probably part of why I'm a bit of a pioneer in my own ways as well.
Mhm.
But honestly, the concepts of money in my family were not taught. It just wasn't there. Not the principles of the wealthy, right? Like we were taught ethical stuff. We were taught about being a good person and sharing, giving back, all stuff like that. But we weren't taught anything that would lead you to growing your wealth, right? So this led me over a period of time to I made a lot of financial mistakes as an adolescent and a young adult. However, what I discovered during that time was I was so hungry to learn. I didn't have any mentors. I know you talked about mentors along the way, so I was kind of an orphan in that regard of having business or financial mentors. But I was kind of approaching 30 years old and I felt trapped. I was trapped in a corporate sales position. I was excelling there in my position, but I felt if I look at it from the outside in, I felt very little room for innovation. Looking at those who are further down the path than I was, I'm like, I don't want to be where these people are. Just wasn't impressed. And then serendipitously, through a family friend, this might mirror your story as well, became a mentor. And he had asked me if I'd ever consider doing mortgages. And, I was 30 years old at this time. I didn't know much about my own mortgage at the time, let alone how the industry worked. But while I was working my full-time sales position, I was learning the mortgage business on the evenings and weekends. And this led right up until the 2008 financial crisis. I know a ton of people have great stories about this, but for me, it was like pow, my whole world shifted. I remember I was working for a company that was Japanese headquartered and had Canadian operations, and they made an announcement it was 2009. Things had all trickled down. That they let go 2/3 of the company. So they gathered all of us in the head office warehouse, and the CEO from Japan had flown in. That never happened before, and everything was being translated. This crushing news that 2/3 of the company was being let go. There were tears flowing in the room. I actually remember hearing one lady like shouting in agony. Like it was very raw in the room, and I was having a completely different experience. It was like the most ironic experience of my life, where I was actually trying to suppress a smile. I know I was not being callous. I was suppressing a smile because although I had kept my position within the company, I knew in that moment inside of myself that I was being promoted, that I was moving on. I kind of had this revelation that it kind of thinking about the layoffs and everything, that I put my ladder against the wrong wall, and so what I did was I put in my 2 weeks notice. I never looked back after that. But the funny thing was, in hindsight, it was the worst possible time to be entering the financial services industry in Canada. I didn't know any of this at the time. Interbank lending had ceased. U.S. lenders were leaving Canada in droves. Mortgages were being aborted at closing, orphaned at renewal. I was ignorant to all of this. So I took a blind leap of faith into the future that I believed awaited me, right? And personally, my third son had just been born, and my wife was on maternity leave. So there was no safety net. It was just like a pure leap of faith. And like to go to the depths of it, I remember at Christmas, it was months later. The only reason we kept the hydro on that year was because I had a small referral commission for about, I think it was like $500 came in. It took me, I had like I've talked to colleagues and other people in the industry who bought a book of business, had someone who was feeding them leads, and it was really a smooth process. It was not smooth for me. I was cutting my teeth. Took about 6 months for me to start closing mortgages, but I was so intent on succeeding that I never looked back, and I never thought about quitting. And that's 15 years ago today.
I love that story, man. And also, this isn't, sometimes people say this and they're just like, oh man, this guy's just trying to make me feel good. I believe this from this perspective. You are talking about in 2008, which was nearly 20 years ago, having a wife and 3 kids. And I'm thinking you're like 37 years old. So you must, in my mind, you had kids at 16.
No.
Man, you've aged well. I'm not going to ask, but I'm just saying, when you're talking about 2008, I'm thinking I was like 17 years old. I was in high school basically when that all happened. And actually, it was the only real estate. I'm going to just get off for 2 seconds and then we're going to get back. It's the only real estate investment that I've ever made. And I'm not going to base all of my future real estate investments on this one because this one was very, very good for us. We had a group of 20 from the same mentor. She and a few partners, that's what they did. They bought, they flipped, they invested into buildings, things like that. We bought 5 houses in Florida that, you know, in 2005 were valued around 400, 450 and are now being given away.
Yeah.
The lowest one was 102. I think the highest one was 167. And we hung on to them until just before COVID.
Wow.
Just before COVID. So yeah, that was a hell of an
formative,
investment.
right? It forms your thoughts surrounding real estate. And yeah, I've heard too many stories like that.
But it's amazing. It seemed to me like you had this idea while you were in that Japanese company and maybe a little uncertain. But when all this happened, all of a sudden you just got hit with a huge amount of conviction, knowing that what you originally thought was true. And that's what took you on to the next stage of life. Is that kind of what I got? Conviction can be an unbelievable motivator when you feel like, if I can just answer this one thing, I know this is my path. And to be smacked in the face with such a ball of energy like that must have been a pretty satisfying feeling. Not to say, you know, there was a lot of suffering in that time, but for you specifically, that must have been kind of like that light bulb moment or that, you know, come to Jesus moment that people talk about, that real life transformation moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah, amazing. Really quick, because we've talked about this a few times on the show. I think, we have a lot of regular viewers. So if we can maybe put a little spin on this, but this myths and misconceptions question, a lot of this, we've been talking about education since we started. There are myths and misconceptions to pretty much everything out there, certainly to mortgages. So if maybe you could just touch on the main two, if you have some, just to clarify the audience. So like whatever information I have in my head, I am basing my decisions going forward on that information. I use the seatbelt analogy because it wasn't too long ago that none of us wore seatbelts and that was the information in our head.
Yeah.
Why do it? You got to sell me on it to do it. And then people started dying. And now that was the information we had. And now we wear seatbelts. And that's how drastic information can be loaded in somebody's mind and the decisions that they make. So anything you can clarify in the mortgage world, especially from my point of view, because this changed a lot for me, dealing with a mortgage agent firm company like yourself compared to a bank, maybe if you could touch on that.
Yeah, I'll definitely touch on that. So, yeah, I have another one, but I'll touch on the one that you said first. So, as far as it's kind of it's an answer to another question as well. But what the difference is, I'm going to parse it down even further. So anyway, I'm taking time to formulate it, but
No problem.
I'm not even going to go with the bank. I want to go with the misconception, not the misconception. Is that what you're talking about? What are we talking about here?
Myths and misconceptions. Just basically clarifying inaccurate information out there for people.
Yeah. The one, if we're going to talk about from my industry standpoint, and the banks are going to throw in here. So let's do it. So the independent mortgage broker, and I'm going to parse it out here. So I'm not talking about a bank mortgage specialist. I'm not talking about the employee of a mortgage company. I'm not talking about these corporate super brokerages out there that are all very, very top down. There's bias in everything, but when we compare the advice you get from an independent mortgage broker, you will receive, I truly believe this, you will receive the least biased mortgage advice. So what I know is that the banks are only loyal to their preferred shareholders. It's who they answer to. Employees are only loyal to their bosses. With these kind of more, they're mortgage companies, but they operate more in a structured format. And the mega broker just typically, not always, but they typically funnel all their agents' business to 1 to 3 preferred lenders. But this is in contrast to, I call it, we're a dying breed, or we're an endangered species of mortgage originators who have no predetermined loyalties outside of getting. We do have our biases. There's no doubt, everyone does. but our primary goal is getting the consumer the best product for their specific needs and circumstances. It's client first. It's the way financial planning is done best and should be done best, and I think mortgage planning as well. And ultimately, it's the way I would want to be treated when I seek out the best financial advice for me and my family. That's one. You wanted to hear two, right?
I mean, that was great. That was very, very helpful. If you have another one that you could touch on, great. If not, we can carry on.
Yeah, no, I really wanted, as far as a misconception, I wanted to go back to, again, this is going way back in my history, but when I first became a mortgage broker, I have to mention this. The first time I mentioned to an in-law what I did for a living, and they almost choked on the words. Like I could have been telling them that I became a cockroach, right? The effect that he spit out something that we were all middlemen parasites, like something to that effect. And at the time, I knew this to be a fact, that they were as ignorant of the industry as I was. So this kind of led me to believe over time that there's a prevailing sentiment in a segment of the population that believes this. And now I will admit fully that there are some parasitic middlemen in my industry. However, this exists in every industry where sales are incentivized.
I agree.
And the big banks are not immune, right? They're not immune to this behavior. And with this said, we cannot negate the lifetime value of a competent mortgage broker that's part of your financial services team.
Beautiful. I think all very, very relevant and very helpful for me too. And then one more thing that I was thinking about that would be helpful for me is I believe I talk to more mortgage brokers than agents.
Okay.
Yeah, certainly with our clients. What's the difference?
Yeah,
I look at the mortgage broker as like the big bad version of, like, the boss of the mortgage agent is, in my head, it's like the better one, essentially, for elementary words.
Effectively, I mean, we all do mortgage brokering as per our what our work, but we do have different kind of designations, right? So, and there's a nuance in there as well now. There's an agent level 1 and agent level 2, which has just come out this spring. But anyways, to your question, brokers basically can have other agents underneath them. Agents cannot. Agents can have licensed or unlicensed help towards our team, but they can't have. But we can all do the same things as far as mortgages are concerned. But they can grow a mortgage business. Also, what was I? Oh yeah, the agent level 1, agent level 2. This is a newer one. An agent level 1 cannot do private mortgages, whereas an agent level 2, which is a new designation, can do private mortgages and more complex mortgage transactions. And I am a mortgage agent level 2.
Beautiful. And real quick, when you bring things up that I don't understand, my first thought is I need to understand that. So what is private compared to not private, I'm assuming?
Yeah. I mean, all other mortgages are going to be in the institutional lender box. So these would be the chartered banks, trust companies, credit unions, mortgage finance companies. They're all regulated, or not to say the private mortgage industry is not, but they're regulated highly and differently. And then within the private mortgage side, there are more regulated private mortgages. These are more, I call them more institutional mortgage lenders. They're typically called MICs, or mortgage investment corporations. And then there are, true private lenders, kind of like mom and pop, or investors like yourself or myself, private citizens who have done well, who lend their an allocated portion of their funds into private mortgages as an investment class.
Even that piece of information I found out a few years ago. Like, I did not know until early 30s that we could invest our money and help somebody get a mortgage. I thought it's like TD Bank and Royal Bank and these banks, they run all the money. We don't get a piece. We just put it in the stocks or mutual funds or RSPs. And that was it. I grew up in a banker's house. So it was like, get a credit card young and pay your bills and don't do any interest. Pay down all your interest as quickly as possible. Get an RSP, mutual fund, tax-free savings account, and you'll probably be ahead of the vast majority just from those tips at a young age. But stock markets and these types of piece of advice, like, I just didn't know these things. So it starts to clarify what a mortgage is, how it's used, and how it could benefit me both as a person who invests into it and has one myself. But that's the point of these conversations, right? Is to try to understand what is not so confusing once discussed. But I think I won't make a blanketed statement. From my perspective and from my friends that I know I can speak for, even growing up in a banking family, money is still so murky. It's still such a cloudy world. Taxes,
Absolutely.
investing, how do I spend it, best practices. I have the psychology of money behind me. There's a number of financial books behind there, but that book in particular really talks about the emotional connection that we have to earning and spending, which it's like, this should be grade 7 standard. You can't get past the grade without this book, because you don't need to be a genius to understand it. Like some of those back there are quite difficult that I still have a hard time understanding, but it's just unfortunate that something that is such an absolute necessity, you don't really have a choice to make or not make money. But the difference between living at survival level your entire life and constantly being stressed by this tool and being financially free seems to be a handful of conversations and changes in habits and mindset.
I agree.
You don't have to make gazillions of dollars. Most of us won't, but if you use it more effectively, and that's what we really hope these conversations come from. So I appreciate you coming on the show and being so transparent with that information.
That was well said, by the way. Your summation there, very well said.
Oh, I appreciate it, man. It's from learning from guys like you. It's just that simple. Without guys like you, I wouldn't have been able to do it, because in the marketing world, we are not forced by necessity to learn about money.
Exactly.
We know how to gather attention and bring people to your party and build relationships, but you can do that and be a broke marketer, and that could last for decades. So, but getting outside of that, getting into the personal a little bit, we'll start off with something light. What puts a smile on your face, Michael, outside of like breaking down the walls of truth in the financial world? You got kids, you got all that, but outside of business and outside of family, what puts a smile on your face personally?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I'll say one little bit about work. I went through a year or two back and redid my core values for the company, and one of them actually that rose to the top was having fun in everything we do, and that's tested sometimes. You know, when you're talking to that difficult client, not to make light of it or to have fun at someone's expense, but to not, you know, to keep a light attitude and have fun in doing your work. You know, it's almost a Mary Poppins thing. You know, it's like every work that's done, there's an element of fun. You know, that aspect. Anyways, I don't want to talk about work. I just want to throw that out there because we're talking about fun. But my main fun is I'm a dad of 5 kids. I'm the consummate dad. I've been a dad for many years now. Never dull moments. Not always fun. Lots of crises happen. But I love being a dad, and my most fun moments are spent with my family at the beach, either here in Simcoe County or you know, wherever we find ourselves. We love being active, going for walks, cycling along the waterfront, and my personal kind of my hobby. I love creating the main dish for company. I love something extravagant. I love executing it flawlessly. I'm not a chef, but I'm really good at following a recipe. And I'm a voracious reader as well. And specifically right now, I find I'm really doubling down on historical fiction. I'm eating up historical fiction.
I love it, man. I have 2 things for you. First off, I appreciate you answering the question and not saying family and business. Originally, when I started answering that question, I said, what puts a smile on your face? And people are like, I love my work. And then next to that, it was, I love my family. It's like, okay, after 400 podcasts, no more family and business. But, you know, now we know you love to host, which is great. So you're obviously a people person. You're super easy to talk to, and you have this very outgoing energy about you that at least I've felt, which is fantastic, especially in such a relationship world and being a dad. So I have these things on my arm because I say I take life very seriously, whereas most people will say don't take life seriously. I take it very seriously so I can enjoy the heck out of it. So I have my rules for life on there. I think it's easy to be good when things are going good. I think it's harder to be good when things hit the fan, when shit hits the fan. So they're there to guide me. Annoyingly, many times I just effed up and it's like, there they are, constantly reminding me. But The closest relationship I've ever had in my life, without a shadow of a doubt, is the one with my father. He's my guy. I have the note that he wrote me when I was 18 that I really enjoyed, but really didn't stick until about 24, 25. The whole thing takes up my entire back. So he's with me everywhere I go. He's still around, but he's my guy. We work out together. We walk, we read together. We do our thing together. So I've seen a lot of my friends become dads early, 19, 20, 21, and they all tried really hard and they all love their kids, but I feel like they allow themselves to move into unnecessary, unfortunate circumstances because they just didn't have the skill yet to be a father at the level that I hope I can be. And because I've had such a tight relationship with my father, who's 30 years older than I am, I wanted to become a certain individual before I became a father. I wanted to have a business that was established. I didn't want to be paycheck to paycheck, moving places to places. I also wanted to be a certain type of individual to attract a certain partner, as I've learned from a number of the relationships in my life, that may be the biggest decision you ever made, you ever make, that will have the most impact on your life. So fatherhood is basically what I'm doing all this for, to be a great husband and to be a great father. I think it's the highest privilege for a man. I think anybody can become a father. The quote that I love is anybody can become a father, but it takes a lot of skill and effort to become a dad. So I would ask you, from having 5 kids and being the consummate dad, being a dad for so long, do you have one piece of advice for us want to be dads out there, or the dads that are listening, to do it right?
Yeah, it's good. It's good. It's really good. I think this is the crux of the interview.
You're on the spot now, Michael.
Uh,
Give us that dad advice.
yeah, yeah. I honestly, it comes down to leading by example. Nothing else in my mind rises to that. They'll always seem to listen to what you say, but they'll never aspire or stick to it unless they see you doing it. And a quick example, I would just not I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, but my third son is playing rep volleyball right now, and his coach is a tenured star. He's played on the Olympic level volleyball, and there's been these small little hypocritical moments where he says one thing and does another, and my son just picks it up. He picks it up. He picks it up, and it really causes me to self-examine. Am I doing these? Because I know they're not stupid. Am I saying to him one thing and living a different way? Am I holding true to my convictions, my values, my faith, or am I out there, they're not looking, they're not here, I'm home alone, I can do whatever I want. I think even in that, because I've come to realize that all secrets eventually come to the surface in one way or another. So, we can have a mask, we can play a certain role with our family and our loved ones, but especially our loved ones, they're the closest one to us. They're going to find out, right? So I'm like, okay, well, I gotta change me. I gotta change my trajectory here and become who I think I want to become, and consistently, live up to that in front of them and not in front of them, to lead by example. I think it pays such dividends as well if you want to maintain connection with them, especially as they become adults and they want to move away or not spend time with you. That's not what I want. I want them to come back. I want to hang out with them as adults. I want a vacation with them. I want to, like you said, that relationship you have with your dad. I want that with my children, and I think the only way I'm going to have that is if they don't look at me and say, "Yeah, Dad, you weren't the person you said you were or purported that you were," right?
Man, it's such simple advice, hard to do. But I think about the cascading effects of leading by example just in life. I don't think you can spend all that time leading by example in the family environment and not do it in business, and not do it on your sports teams, and not do it on the board of this or with the charity of that. It really just is. I can't think of anything really more beneficial if you want to be a good human, to act it rather than just tell people how to do it. You're really saying you raise yourself to a higher standard of, you know, do what you say, and try to do that always. We will make mistakes, but I don't know if there's better advice to give. And I really appreciate that, because if you can handle 5 kids, then that gives me hope, because that is one of the things, one of the reasons why I haven't become a dad yet is it's like, man, that is the highest responsibility a human can ever have. You're literally creating life and the truest sense of a lifelong commitment. Your marriage, like a marriage may start and stop, but you will always be tethered to another human being once you've created one. It's incredible. Great advice, man. I really appreciate it. This question, a little bit more harder hitting, but I think it's really important. And normally I will speak for 5 minutes, giving you context, and then let you answer. I'm going to short form it a little bit.
Right.
So we talk about the trials and tribulations, hardships that a human goes through. This isn't just in business. This is in life. And we want to be part of the forefront of a group of people that is shedding a light on the value of the more painful sides of life. I believe pain can be and should be objective rather than so subjective. We look at it as having a negative connotation. But some of the greatest things in my life cause constant pain, and I don't look at that pain as a negative. The gym, for example, it really is true that if you're trying to grow muscle, that the results start once the pain starts. So the people that have been going to the gym for a very long time wait for that pain to start. That's what they're seeking. And once they get there, it's a green light. So that tells me that pain isn't negative or positive. It's how I'm going to use it. And certainly the most transformative moments of my life have been through the hardest circumstances. The one that I share most often, because it's obviously the most potent in my life, is I busted both my legs in my mid-20s, and that led to a dependency on painkillers that was just an absolute nightmare.
Wow.
Changed my life drastically, as you can imagine. You know, basically being a slave to this little tiny thing, having full control over me. Essentially, I would wish that upon nobody. But from that, I had to develop skills to learn how to live a better existence, and it changed my life drastically. So now, when I look back on that, would I remove that ingredient from the recipe that has become me? Not a chance. There's no way, because I wouldn't have the life I have today. So we like to ask the guest on the show, related to some type of context like that, you ever been through something that probably sucked in the moment, probably didn't want to go through it, but when you look back in hindsight, it became integral to you becoming who you are?
Absolutely. Well, I'm gonna give you a litany. Are you ready?
Sure. Let us have it.
Okay, so in the last 10 years, I've overcome divorce. I've had my house burned down in front of my eyes.
Oh my
I've had a
God.
major cycling accident where I broke my clavicle, 8 ribs, and collapsed my lung. I was in Sunnybrook for 10 days. And then COVID-19 happened. So that I won't get into how that affected me, my business, my family, but everyone has their story. But I actually I don't want to talk about any of those things that happened to me. I actually want to talk about a challenge, something that I challenged and overcame of my own design and my own execution. So this back at the beginning of 2023, I was reading about pilgrimage and specifically the Camino de Santiago, the big 800-kilometer hike through Portugal.
Yeah.
And I began the necessary planning. I'm like, I'm going to do this. I was so stoked, and I realized very quickly that this was going to be a multi-year preparation. It wasn't going to be something that I was going to, plan and execute in 1 year. So I started looking for a more local pilgrimage, and I found one that literally started outside my front door at the Barrie waterfront. So last October, I walked the Martyrs Shrines pilgrim route. It's a 89-kilometer route from Barrie to Aurelia, and then from Aurelia you travel across through Coldwater and you end up in Midland. So I had a 45-pound backpack on, and I traversed our backyard through Simcoe County. But what I had not prepared for was the unseasonably warm weather that we experienced that week. I prepared for cold, I prepared for wet, I did not prepare for heat. And after my first day, I walked 35 kilometers. I had heat exhaustion. I had blisters on my feet in places that I couldn't imagine. And I was dehydrated from the near 30-degree weather. So much so I had to hole up in a motel for 24 hours to recover. I couldn't keep walking. It was that bad.
Wow.
And so I did like ice baths and just nurse my wounds, have, Band-Aids all over my feet and just slept. And then the next day I set out at 5 a.m. And I walked another 32 kilometers to Wabashine. I walked through the countryside, and that I left so early in the morning. I was so eager to get out there. I didn't realize I was walking out in the country in the pitch black with just my headlamp, and like this is coyote country. So it challenged me on like the level of facing your demons, right? I was out there walking this trail on my own in the middle of the nowhere at night. I know I wasn't in like Northern Ontario or something, but it still felt like it. And then the thankfully there were no coyotes about. And then I finished the following day with another 22 kilometers to the Martyrs Shrine in Midland. And the reason why I can say that I'm stronger for this is that the nuance here is that there's one thing to have life throw things at you. I mean, we all have it; it's going to come, and we're forced to react. We're forced to test our mettle, see if we're going to be resilient or not. I find it's another, especially when, like you said, if you come to know the pain is the part of the progress, to take life by the horns and do something difficult on purpose to test your mettle and prove to yourself that you can accomplish something hard. Yeah.
Man, amazing story. First off, I love the pilgrimage. I've only recently found out about that in Portugal a few years ago. Rewatched the documentary, like, I don't know, 4 months ago, it seems. Amazing, amazing story. It was actually a father and his son. I think it's on Prime right now.
Okay.
Doing the pilgrimage because his dad was diagnosed with something terminal and wanted to.
Right. I think it's called The Way with Emilio Estevez or something. Yeah, I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, very cool. But the second half of that, you touching on voluntarily choosing to move through pain because of the reward that it brings, I think is in a completely different end of the spectrum than forcing me to go through something that if I don't go through, like I don't survive type of thing.
Yeah.
You have no choice. Necessity is on the line. Survival's on the line. For me to get in a bath filled with ice or to move through those moments in the gym, especially squats. I mean, people leg day, if people do hard leg days, they know how incredible that pain is. But other things, studying hard, meditating, these things that you choose to do for the reward, it's in the pain that you find yourself. And for anybody who hasn't taken themselves to the brink or through moments like that, like, I don't know what to say other than give it a shot and see what happens. Pain can be your gateway to finding yourself. I don't know. It's I look at life as, I don't think anybody gets by unscathed. I think you just can't move through life without some level of suffering. And I look at it as you either choose your pain or have your pain chosen for you. And anytime it's chosen for me, it hasn't come even close to the results of choosing my own.
And one thing I add to it is those who are easy on life will be hard on them. Those who are hard on life, that approach, life will be easy on them. It's not a direct correlation, but it's good as an adage for sure.
Yeah, it's beautiful. There's a book called Easy Choices, Hard Life, Hard Choices, Easy Life. And this was his model. He was a fitness trainer, an Olympian trainer, and this was his philosophy for life. It's like, you do the hard things. I got it right here. Do hard things,
Nice.
Not have hard things done to me. But amazing story, man. It's just been fantastic talking to you. Can we get the best ways to connect with you? Because I imagine some people are going to want to chat to you after this.
Yeah, 100%. Appreciate it. You can always reach out to me at mortgagetruth.ca. That's our website. Has lots of information there, but specifically through the contact page, I know there's a lot of information out there. So it's always good to have a conversation with your specific situation in mind. And we're also on social, Mortgage Truth, Instagram, Facebook, or you can come visit us. We're right downtown Barrie at our location across from City Hall. If you want to come in for a coffee and a chat, we're available regular business hours.
Beautiful. And what's the address there?
It is 84 Worsley Street.
Awesome, man. Michael, this has been I love doing these podcasts, but there is no question in my mind. I think it's like the 408th that there are some that I'm like, I can't wait for them to be done. And then there are others where it's 11:55 right now. I have 3 more questions on the list, and I could come up with another 20 and talk to you easily for another hour or 2, I'm sure. You've been a pleasure, man. You bring a lot of joy to this conversation, a lot of great education that I think can help a lot of people. But not even but, and the transparency through which you conduct yourself is most meaningful to me, and I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeff. We're gonna work towards the truth.
Love it, man. You have a great day.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Good Neighbor Podcast Midhurst. To nominate your favorite local businesses to be featured on the show, go to gnpmidhurst.com. That's gnpmidhurst.com or call 705-413-3775.